there was a moment when in the Russian version of the ENOG site it was not possible to rate, so you can push the button, but nothing happened. So actually, if you pushed the button and you think that you have given your rating, this is not the case. Therefore, would you please kindly revert to the Russian version, because now everything is operating fairly well, and we very much hope that you will be giving your ratings. Fine. So we now proceed to my second presentation, and it is about the types of attacks that I have already described, and I will only present the main ideas. Therefore, so actually we monitor better routes within internet, but we will not be speaking once again as to how internet works. So let us skip these slides. But in reality, what is really important that within internet different operators filter out better routes because initially internet was the open network where everyone trusted everyone, but situation today has changed. There are errors of configuration. There is so actually intended behavior, and we need to filter that out. What is a better route? This is determined by the community, and you can look at them in BCP, or we can also look at prefix verification of routes, and we can decide as to what is better, what needs to be filtered out. What is it that we want to do? We want to find the operators who send bad routes. Right, we have several attackers, then we understand that, but if we have a considerable number of ordinary operators that do that, we need to understand why they do that. On the other hand, there are major operators, large-scale operators, who say, yes, we will be filtering, we filter, so we have the prefix filters, we also check ISPAS, and if we find in our data that there is a route that goes through them, and at the same time this route is bad, then it turns out that they did not do filtering, and this means that what they stated is not true. For whom this can be interesting, there is an organization that is called the MANRS that say there are operators, and these operators are expected to do a set of actions, and it is possible to check whether or not they perform these filtration-related actions. And there was a proposal some time ago, if the operator violates the MANRS rules, they need to be sanctioned in one form or the other. And also 1 or 2 months ago, there was a proposal to remove status from layers if they do hijacking and attacks. So today we will look at two situations. So the routes, so 2532 v4 and higher than slash 48. So actually it was stated long ago they need to be filtered everywhere, and so large-scale operators, of course, are expected to filter that. And with ROA invalid, this is the topic that is raised in many different conferences. There is always 1 or 2 presentations that describe ROA, RPKI, etc. Now, what is it that we can do? We love counting people who violate something, and again, even within the framework of these ENOG meetings, there were graphs with the remaining number of IP addresses, large-scale operators who do something very good or very poorly, and so on and so forth. Therefore, we can ask ourselves the question, why is it not possible for us to do all that? that. The more so that we have seen several graphs that show that this number of prefixes violate the ROA policy, or for instance these operators violate prefix origin validation, and let us count that, and which will be the most reasonable approach. If we want to detect all operators who fail to do that, there is one method. We need to take an open source. We need to take from their all sources, and if there is a poor, there is a bad route, and if there is access to IS path, then based on this path one can come to certain conclusions. If there is a bad route, then the first autonomous, I think, in this route is announced, and this means that this operator is bad and he needs to be responsible. But then it would in fact mean that no filtration is carried out, and we can follow these reports, but because we have certain analytics, we can project certain results in advance. So what invalid only started to be filtered out, therefore they will be widely spread, and we looked at specifics or invalid ROAs, and there you can find /25/20C, and the number of prefixes from one and the same operator can be considerable. Therefore this does not make any sense. And what makes sense is to look at the number of different operators. So in each case this is an independent case. So we know that there is also /32 that is used for blackholing. And black hole routes, they are not widely spread, and we can see that if a node collector is installed within this operator and he decided to give us all the routes, but this technology is fairly widespread, and in effect statistics if we put everything together. Therefore it is necessary to look at that as a separate case. So we can even come up with a certain value, and we can even look at that. We can even see certain changes, and we can see that the violation of routes with correct ROA is much higher than with incorrect ROA, and then based on these values we can start building charts. We can make real-time graphs where we can follow the change of the situation from day to day, percentages and so on and so forth, everything what is done by others. But we can also look at all of this in a greater detail. So most of the routes that are specific have a valid alternative that is announced by the operator, and the number of such routes is fairly great. So in any case it is over 90%, and this allows us and enables us to give it a second step. At the same time, the number of operators who violate that is also fairly considerable. There are errors of configuration, probably 50, 100 operators across the world probably do violate that. But invalid row is a different case. You create a row object and you do not sign /32. So you limit yourself from the very outset with regard to what you can announce. But at the same time you announce a bad route, and then you send a good alternative in any case, and there are several hundreds of such operators. The situation is very strange, and then we recall that our analysis is based on routes, because routes is the only thing that is accessible for us, and the routes can be changed, can be modified. And in my previous presentation I spoke as to how they can be changed by transit operator in order to get a higher revenue. At the same time there is traffic engineering, and if these routes leak and if the whole world sees them, then these cases will not be different from deliberate hijacks. So let us recall how can we detect such a situation. The attack, so if this prefix is not intended to be globally rooted, so we'll have attackers in all its airspaces. And the problem is that if we only look at this critical point, and if we blame the attacker who has a critical weight for many operators, then we can come across a valid case, and I decided to show such a case in this presentation. So there is a major transit in Iran which is critical for the region. And you cannot blame them for doing something bad because small operators do not have any alternatives to carry out transit. And this situation is very interesting from the point of view of stability. This is an absolutely different type of analysis. And we need to conduct, and we do conduct such analysis. But it's not exactly what we want to speak about today. And it is worth mentioning that the transit provider who provides services for its stubs has the same characteristics. Therefore, it is necessary to screen valid cases from non-valid cases. And if for valid we have alternatives, then this means that nothing is that things are not really perfect. So some of the operators can be seen as backup operators for their prefix and not to send prefixes there or to do other things as it is done in traffic engineering. But so one is unable to believe that this can be done for a considerable number of small operators. And if for small operators, if for small operators it's becoming critical focus, then the bingo will be the attack. Yes, for both categories we find operators who do these poor things, and in case of invalid lengths. So those two operators, I think both are from Brazil, and they carry out such attacks. So they are transit for their customers, and they redirect the route through themselves, and we take on them, then the number of conflicts will decrease very considerably. And when it comes to specifics slash 26/32, there are other operators who introduce a lot of noise. So what is it that we see? We see operators who are responsible for the statistics, for the general statistics. And if we look at a certain data and we would not filter out those operators, then the number of operators and operators that announce a non-valid address space will become much less. And if you look at the cross-section of line 1 and line 2, so major operators who violate lengths, and so in a case of invalids, filtration of all routes that have the lengths /24 and greater, so this will not save the situation, and any analytics that will rely on that, even considering such a filter, will be erroneous. And what is it that we end up with? So in case of traffic engineering, it is not exactly clear in what cases the operator does have the right to break prefix into sub-prefixes, and in what cases so does not have the right to do that. And the second situation, only this approach is not sufficient in order to filter out all bad root cases, because they can be very easily bypassed. I mean, methodology can be bypassed in a very simple and easy way, and also there can be situations where there are several attackers that send one and the same prefix, or else you may have valid prefix or non-valid everything. You can find such situations and you can filter them out, but they introduce a lot of noise into the data, but it is very difficult to do that. And again, so in principle, coming back to the problem that I raised at the beginning, there are three questions. Who is it who announces what should not be announced? Who is who fails to do filtering? Who is the guilty party? And there is an approach that provides answers to all these questions. This is the BGP session with all these operators. Why does it help? Because within a valid IS path, you can go through all autonomous things that you had, but of course no one can do that in reality. At least we are not able to do that, but if we do it correctly, the approach to monitoring such situations will change. Well, in a nutshell, what is it that we learned today? Any analytics that will be based on routes is not complete. It is really incomplete because the router can be wrong. We have already seen the cases when actually this is the case, and the problem is that it is much more difficult to filter them out than to find them, to design them, and to create them. And even if we know the method of the approach to filtration, it is a method of filtration. It is possible to bypass the filter, and in all the reports that you will see, the key aspect is to find which methodology they use, and if the methodology is not open, then you need to take these data with a grain of salt, I would say. You should not rely on the data, but if there is a methodology, then it is necessary to see whether or not there are any core cases that would make you to revisit your conclusions. So if we come back to the question, the end operators do not create bait routes. It is the transit that create them, but it's very difficult to show accurate data. Why? Because of corner cases, the filtration and so on and so forth, this prevents us from doing it. But even these data are sufficient to demonstrate the situation is really difficult. It is necessary to have an absolutely different approach to address this problem. Thank you very much indeed. I would like to ask you a question. So, among this AS 9002, so it is possible to look at that. But have you done that? So they do not have any valid routes for which they would be critical.